Hello, I am Joel McLeod.
I'm Roland Tanner.
And welcome back to the 905 Roundup. We have a packed full episode for you folks, so let's dive right into it. Roland, what have you got on the far side of the 905 for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're the 905 podcast, and we haven't thus far talked a whole lot about Durham region in particular. And, partly that's just where our expertise lays, and we're trying to sort of grow into that realm. But we do check out the news from time to time, and I was kind of checking out the news today, and it's like, geez, there's a real shortage, it seems to me, unless I'm missing something, of good websites or other people covering any kind of news out in Durham region. I refuse to believe that a region with, I don't know what the population is, but it's got to be million plus, I guess, doesn't have exactly the same kind of stories going on as we do over here on this side of the 905, but it's really hard to find out about them. And to extent, that's a problem we've had with Peel and York as well. I mean, just to an extent, it illustrates that we need people in those parts of the 905 to help us to tell the stories that are important to you. And if you have a background in journalism, if you know of good websites, if you know of people who are doing podcasts or anything like that, let us know, and let us know the stories that you think should be covered. That because it's crazy that we live in this world where I look at the the Metroland Media newspaper out in Durham is called durhamregion.com. And the first thing you see when you load it, it says, notice to readers, register to support local journalism because it's so important we support local journalism. Well, why the hell you want to pay for this stuff? I do not know, because it's pretty woeful. It's blizzard warning in Durham. Well, yeah, I can look out the window and tell you there's a blizzard warning in Durham.
It's a blizzard warning.
I'm in Hamilton.
Yeah, it's a blizzard warning in the entire province. Nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
who did you pay to write that headline?
Yeah, and more upsetting. I mean, sure, that's the traditional meat and potatoes of local journalism, I guess. Although I've never found it very interesting. More disappointing is you go to a story about Oshawa passing their budget, and it's a very short article saying there's a 1.25% increase. I'm just trying to find that story again right this second. And half of the article was a press release from the city. And it's like, well, that's not really what local journalism exists to do. You're meant to question the press release.
Well, look at the local papers that you and I are familiar with in more in depth. Most of it is written I think the people who write for them are good journalists. You can tell that there are people who are very passionate about their craft and their career, and that they work hard. I think the problem is clearly they are very understaffed. Let's just crack open a quick article to fill a couple inches on the page, and that's it. And it's just, there's no time to get into where the issues lay. It's easy to scratch that surface content, right? School or city council passed a budget slight increase. It's like, well, can you get into what should that increase be more? What are they not paying for? What's the real analysis of this? What would the city possibly be neglecting, or maybe where are the priorities? Should they be, and more importantly, what focus is the city going to have that will shape the way it evolves? And that's, to me, that's where that's kind of why we started this. Ultimately, was that I remember, for me, I was reading a couple stories in our local paper, and it was all about crime is going to be taking over Halton region. And I remember reading okay, but there's no details about this. They want to kind of scare you with the police were catching the bad guys. Well, they didn't even say basic story. Did they catch the right guy? What were the charges? Is this part of a larger, or project by the police, or is this just, hey, they got lucky? What's the context here? You can't just say, oh, and that's kind of the caliber of the stories that we were getting. We said, no, I don't care about those stories. I don't care about traffic accident on the QEW or whatnot. What I do care about is, why is it so hard to get good transit in this region? Why is it so hard to move around? Why is it so hard to find a place to live? And why is it that we hear of people losing their homes or their livelihood? It's never put in the context of, it's impossible to pay a mortgage in the 905 region these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I don't understand Metroland Media, because the Metroland Media dominates the existing journalism in much of the 905, really anywhere except Hamilton. And there are some good websites out there. I'm not belittling them, but it's still the case that the dominant media is Metroland Media.
But Metroland is owned by Torstar, and Torstar also owns the Spec.
Yeah. I mean, and the Spec is, for whatever reason, the Spec is more like what I consider a real paper still. It, like the Star, love it or loathe it, the Star is a regular newspaper. It has opinion, it has columnists, the Spec has that. It used to be a lot more of that, but it still has some of that. These other newspapers, which are all basically the same sort of thing, branded with a different front page stuck on them, they don't really. I mean, and again, I'm not having a go at the journalists, because I suspect they'd rather be doing more interesting things themselves. But for whatever reason, it's what Torstar wants, I guess. Because, it's like you do an article about a council budget, which the staff originally came back with a I don't know if it was a recommendation, but they came back with, the city needs to increase 5% this year, and then they voted for 1.25. Well, there's a huge question for any journalist there. Okay, what got cancelled so that we could get to 1.25? And okay, there's some budget, some funding coming from the province, and there's this and then that and the other. But basically, any budget that is as low as that in any city in the 905, it's either coming out of your sort of reserve funds, or it's coming out of services. That's where it comes from.
Or your city council made a bad decision, which again should go to being accountable to the people who elected them.
Yeah. So to sort of imply that there's really no questions to be asked is not good enough. I mean, just picking one other story, almost at random, but it illustrates the difference, actually. Like you say, I'm going to be talking about two newspapers. They're both Torstar newspapers. One dealt with the story reasonably well. One dealt with it not so well. But Pickering Council, a councillor late last year, Ian Cumming, sadly passed away. As a result, there's a vacancy in Pickering's Ward 2. And council voted to place, there's a choice of having a by-election, or you can just appoint someone. We saw this in Hamilton. They've appointed someone. Now, in Hamilton, that was a big story. Who are they going to appoint? Why are they appointing them? And it wasn't just the Spectator. It was also covered by, Joey Coleman and Laura Babcock and the various kind of, and us, the various entities that are out there. It was kind of a big story and an important one. It's like, okay, first, why are you not letting people have a vote? And B, why are you sort of picking someone from the Old Boys Network as the likely favoured candidate, who ultimately was not chosen? But, well, anyway, it was a story that got attention in the media. Here in Pickering, a replacement's been put on council. Basically, no one's going to notice, no one's talking about this. There's no kind of, maybe we should have had a by-election. Is this the right person? I mean, that council in Pickering is the most middle-aged white male council you've ever seen in your life. So the fact that they've appointed a woman, Christine Doody Hamilton, as the councillor is, I guess that's good. Her resume looks perfectly fine, all those things, fine. But again, it's like, shouldn't there be some debate about this, that the council should be held to account for? Why aren't you holding a by-election? Sure, there's only a bit over 6 months to go now, so maybe that's pushing it. I don't know, but who's being chosen here and why? Maybe there's a praiseworthy story here. I mean, certainly it seemed that Pickering was reaching out, looking far more at, let's just pick someone from the community rather than let's find someone who's been a councillor before who we know will vote the way we want and do what we want to sit on this council for 6 months.
I think the lesson that we've learned on this end of the 905 has been we shouldn't be taking our democratic institutions for granted. We elect city councils. We elect them for a reason. We should keep electing them because they do have a lot of power over our local and immediate lives. Yeah, I mean, you're right. This should be something that should be analyzed in the media and should be debated upon. And questions should be asked a little bit more in detail, maybe of why this course of action was particularly taken. Maybe there is a valid reason. I'll leave it at that. But I mean,
it is. I mean, I guess in Hamilton, you had a few extra months kind of to play with. It was almost a full year at that point when they were appointing a replacement. It is now getting down to the wire in terms of what you can do before the election is held later this year. But then again, I mean, it's like, so that Pickering Council, as far as I'm aware, and I would have to go and check, but I know it was all male. I think it was all white male. So they've picked a white woman. It's like, well, last time I checked, Durham region was a highly ethnically diverse region. There's so many things that could be asked about appointments like this. Yeah, sure. It's nice to have six men to one woman to actually have some level of variety. I don't think we can really call it diversity on council, but yeah, I mean, it's like, did this not occur to anybody at the durhamregion.com? It must do, surely. And surely readers would be more interested in that than the kind of tedious stuff that just gets published day after day.
If you publish stuff that, if you treat it, I guess, as a slog, right? It's, let's just put out the bare minimum. People start to lose interest. I know, because there are people who, when I've talked about stuff that impact locally here, we live in Burlington. I live in Burlington now. Stuff that happens locally, hey, council decided on this, and this. People say, oh, I didn't know about that. Where'd you find that? I'm like, well, we had to go searching through the website or through the grapevine, and you find this out and you get the facts and you learn what happened. A lot of people say, I don't know. I know nothing about what happens locally. Mostly because the sources of that information don't treat that information seriously, I find. There is no analysis. There is no critique of council decisions. And that, again, it comes back to one of the reasons why you and I wanted to do this podcast, was because it gives us a chance to talk to the people and the power brokers that exist within the 905 and get a sense of what actually is going on in the region, in these communities, and kind of get a better sense of where do these communities need to go and develop in the future. And that's something those are questions that are not even, I don't think they're even thought about in Metroland properties.
They're really not. I mean, they almost scream, we live in a boring place. You're going to be, hey folks, you're going to be interested in blizzard warnings. And, well, here we go. Headline: Durham Police Community Groups celebrate healthcare heroes. Well, yeah, great, awesome. But it's like, are you not even questioning what's going on with the politicians, with what the province is doing, how it's affecting the region? I mean, development is an issue everywhere. So if it's not somewhere mentioned on the front page or something, it seems to me that they're not paying attention. And it's a shame, because it does a disservice to, like I say, the millions of people who live in these regions who are treated as if there's nothing of interest to say. And I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
Well, let's take a break from that for now, and we'll move on to our next story. But before that, we're going to have a word from our sponsor. And we're back. So after talking about issues that are not getting enough coverage in the 905, I did notice there was one more issue that ironically, it did get some attention in the Globe and Mail, but something I don't think really, not enough in my opinion. So in the Globe and Mail, if you were reading on New Year's Day, you would have seen an article by Oliver Moore, who's the urban affairs reporter for the Globe and Mail, and it was titled "Mississauga, a cautionary tale as cities sprawl out across southern Ontario." And basically the gist of it is the last piece of untouched land in Mississauga has been sold off to developers. There's nothing left to develop in Mississauga from this point forward, which as listeners of this podcast will know, development is kind of our bread and butter. So this one definitely caught my eye as a story that we should be talking about.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess to sort of clarify for anybody who's wondering about this, most cities in the 905, the exceptions actually being Burlington is one of the exceptions, and I guess Mississauga may be the second one, have what's called usually white belt or undeveloped land that was within their boundaries that is considered within the built up area, but is not actually built up. And those are what we're looking at when we're talking about these white belt, and the white belt thing is becoming quite an issue across the region. We're seeing that in Milton right now, and we saw it in Hamilton last year. So Mississauga's got none. So quite literally the only way up is up now, or the only way is intensification. And yeah, I mean, my thoughts certainly are that for a city the size of Mississauga, it must have incredibly low levels of density to have managed to do that, because it's like, this it shouldn't have happened yet in a city the size of Mississauga, and I think it points to mistakes that were made over the last numerous decades. And actually, I think people really should start questioning Hazel McCallion's legacy in Mississauga. She was the queen of sprawl in that city. And I think many of Mississauga tends not to be the top of anybody's list of places that they have ambitions to live in. And you can say that about many cities in the 905. So don't have a go at me, However, it's often said, I don't know how many times I've heard people say, certainly it was said in Burlington all the time when I was running for council, we don't want to be like Mississauga. Ironically, those people were speaking mainly about opposing high-rises, the irony being that Mississauga's real problem is not high-rises but sprawl, it seems. But yeah, I mean, it's...
Here's the thing. I think the lesson to be taken from this is eventually we're all going up. That's the thing, is and then something that we've talked about before is that the argument on, we sprawl or high rise is the wrong argument to make in this one. Most people, I think, because Mississauga got itself into this position because it did not have a forward vision of its development. Not until the last couple decades, or last decade or so, when they actually started to build up around Square One, and that's where you're seeing all the condo towers going up now. That the infamous the Mississauga skyline now, that's recent. That hasn't always been there. Before, Mississauga was very much just strip malls and subdivisions, and it worked for a while, and it was fun, because it was like where you park your car in Mississauga and take the train into Toronto. That was kind of the mentality for a long, long time. That doesn't exist anymore. Now, Mississauga is a place for companies to set up their headquarters and R&D departments and all that. And it's a case, I think, of the check finally coming due, and the question is how they're going to pay. And I kind of do mean that literally, because one of the things that Oliver mentions or goes into in his article is the fact that sprawl costs cities money. I mean, the idea of like, okay, we'll just build out a new subdivision, and the families are going to come in and they'll buy the homes and they'll fill there, and there'll be new people and property values will rise and new property taxes. And it doesn't quite work that way, folks. Those subdivisions are huge money pits for city in terms of infrastructure costs, in terms of water maintenance, water table maintenance. Just the upkeep on sewers alone is ridiculous. The road maintenance and having to install transit that goes in there and whatnot. It's a hugely costly venture for cities, which oftentimes, like, they just say, it's called the Ponzi scheme. How do we pay off the last one? Oh, let's build another one, and it will help to go, and we'll get more property tax revenue. And it just doesn't work that way. And that's
in essence, until the last 10 years, that's exactly how every city in the 905 operated, is that when the land is developed, the city gets a bunch of development fees from the developers. So that's money in the bank. So short-term, money. Long-term, they don't bother thinking 3 years down the road to all the costs that come with maintaining. You've got to build schools. You've got to, maybe that doesn't come out of the city budget, but you've got to build all those things. If you're going to have a community, you need to spend money to make them work. Yeah, you got to put transit in. You got to put blah blah blah, and then you got to maintain that year in year out. So it's been a horrible mistake. It's a mistake that we're dealing with across the 905, but I think Mississauga is kind of the poster child for it. And I think there will come a time where mayors like Hazel McCallion, who kind of still have this glow around them for some reason, because I guess she was in there for around forever. A long time, and
she was there
Hurricane Hazel
literally at the founding of Mississauga, back when it was Streetsville and Port Credit and Cooksville and Malton and all these places, and she was there from the beginning. And I agree. I think like the legacy of she held on. Yeah, great, but I'm wondering at what cost. They right now the city is forced to have to reconfigure itself and have to start talking about building up. And what I will say this: while it's a tough pickle for Mississauga to be in, I do think it's an opportunity for them to kind of lead the way in the 905, because there's talk of how do we build those livable, like that 15-minute city. And there's a couple projects. There's one that was mentioned in the article called Lakeview Village, which is like former Lakeview generating station that was demolished in 2006. And there's a developer who's looking to bring in pretty much 8,000 residents, 9,000 jobs, and a mixture of public parklands, denser living spaces, and the like. And it's an interesting project of what maybe we should be looking at going forward. I don't know. I'm not saying it's the cure-all, but it's an interesting solution to the 905's question about sprawl or bust. Maybe this is the alternative.
I mean, the irony is that everybody in every planning department across the 905, across in Toronto as well, across Canada, every planning department, the developers too often talk about, it's like we need intensification. We need to create walkable cities. We can't rely on cars, and cities that are walkable are just damn well nicer places to live than faceless subdivisions where you have to get in a car just to buy a pint of milk. We know this, but having gone so far down the road of sprawl, it's really difficult to unpick to reverse engineer. I mean, really, that's what we're doing. But now, I mean, like
it's not a matter of reverse engineering, Roland. I mean, like let's face it, Mississauga is forced to do it. Like they don't have an option. They've hit their wall.
They don't have an option, but you can't literally if a subdivision has single-family homes on it now, it's going to have single-family homes on it for the next 50 years. That land is out of your hands now. So I mean, you're left with kind of the scraps as places where you can develop. And obviously, downtown core near transit and all those things. Those things are already happening across the 905. But yeah, I mean, it's tough to put in a usable bus system in a city that wasn't designed for buses. All these things are more challenging in those new cities than they are in the older ones. I mean, I think to an extent that's why, say, a city like Hamilton has an awful lot of potential now, because it wasn't designed for the car in the first place, or the core of it wasn't. So it changes. It means that the city is walkable already. All you do is take the cars out of the equation.
Well, we'll wait and see what happens. And maybe we need to have an episode, Mississauga versus Hamilton.
Check it out.
That would be an interesting idea for a future episode, is if we start pitting communities against each other. I don't know. If you're listening and you think there's merit to this idea, email me, joel.mcleod, MACLEOD, at 905er.ca. I think there's something to be said about this for future episodes. Maybe after the municipal election, but maybe before it. Maybe we'll have mayors come on and they can fight other mayors and explain why their city is better than somebody else's city. But
well, I mean, I'd love to speak to Bonnie Crombie and ask her, how do you uninvent the car, if you see what I mean. It's a challenge. Every city has the same challenge to varying degrees. But
yep. Anywho, so what else? What else we got? You wrote a little piece that got a little bit of attention on the thing called the internet, Roland.
Yeah, every so often the mood takes me, and I actually write something and more to the point, finish it and press the publish button, which just doesn't always happen because I sort of get halfway through and think, no. I mean, to an extent, I feel like I'm a stuck record because I wrote an article last year about the Halton mayors calling for Halton to be excluded from, what was it, lockdown number 2, lockdown number 3, I forget.
Right.
One of the lockdowns, I think it was the second lockdown. They said, we shouldn't be included in this because Halton's got lower numbers, which was A, garbage, and B, none of their business, as far as I was concerned, to sort of second guess scientists. 2 days later, they had to do a U-turn because the entire province had to be locked down. At which point, they had somehow managed to change their minds and decided that the facts that spoke one way on Friday spoke a different way on Monday. Same facts, different result. But they're at it again, not Halton. Now it's Ontario's big city mayors. So that's all the mayors unanimously, apparently. There was a kind of an op-ed in the Star last week from Patrick Brown asking for the schools to reopen today. Now, as it happens, acts of God have intervened in the meantime, and rather than plague and pestilence, it's weather events that are stopping the children going back to school. However, I presume tomorrow the schools will be reopening, and I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I mean, I don't have children. I'm none of it. I kind of, at this point, I'm kind of openly saying I don't know. However, I also know that the big city mayors don't know either. They're putting pressure on, not from any basis in science or facts or epidemiology or public health. They're putting pressure on the province because they're getting pressure from voters. Now, in a normal course of events, that's fine. That's how democracy works. But in a public health crisis, no. The thing we're negotiating with is a virus. We're not negotiating the best deal for our residents. We're negotiating their health. And it's not politicians' business. Politicians should not interfere in public health issues. It has to be done by people who are neutral, impartial, based on an understanding of the facts and how disease spreads. Well, I'm just so annoyed with this whole repeated thing, and the fact that they don't get more criticism than they do, because it just adds to the overall feeling of confusion. The feeling that we're getting different messages from here, there, and everywhere about what the right thing is to do.
It's a case of the mayors are using the bully pulpit, if you will, to drum up support for their own election chances. That's the thing. This year is an election year at the municipal level. That's what this is about. It's about showing, hey, nobody wants lockdowns. Yeah, nobody does. No, I don't like being locked down. I don't like my kids in virtual schooling. But at the same time, I'm also sitting going, I have no clue if it's safe or not. Like that. Like there are people everybody who says I don't like lockdowns. So I'm saying, well, I don't know what's safe or not. The Omicron variant, while not as deadly as Delta or its predecessors, I think it's kind of been a bit of a wake up call to the public at large to say this thing doesn't have an expiry date. There's no waiting it out. As long as what the epidemiologists have been saying so far, as long as the third world is vastly unvaccinated, variants will pop up. Global trade and globalization will mean that they will eventually arrive at our doorstep. It's inevitable. As long as that keeps happening, we need to be prepared for more variants down the road. And I think Omicron's kind of woken people up to say, oh my God, this is the way of the world for the foreseeable future. There's saying, oh, by this summer it'll end the pandemic. I don't know. I really don't. My gut's telling me no, it's not. There'll be some other variant that'll pop up, and that's what I'm waiting to hear from our political leaders at all levels, federal, provincial, and municipal, is the fact that we need to wake up to this reality. There might be another variant coming down the pipeline. We need to figure out. And this is one of the questions that we asked. We have another sneak peek, folks. We have an episode with a real life epidemiologist coming up next week. But we're one of the questions we asked him was, how do we live with this? Like we need to shift behaviors and expectations and mechanisms for dealing with this. And that's something that none of our political leadership wants to really talk about. It's easier to write letters and to point fingers at Doug Ford, which he does deserve. I'm not going to let him off the hook, just FYI. But that's what these letters are. It's Patrick Brown and John Tory and all the mayors just trying to curry favor with a group that they hope will elect them into power again this year. And it's shallow opportunism at its most blatant.
And, I'm surprised something that would be unanimous that not one of them would go, should we really be diving into the whole school debate? I mean, all I can think is the impression I've received at various points is that the pressure that municipal politicians are under at the moment is very much coming from businesses and employees, and the other thing is, I think an awful lot of them spend much too much time kind of on those community Facebook groups. I'm thinking of sort of dads, whatever it's called, Dads Reunited and Mums Reunited, or not called Reunited, but and not necessarily getting a remotely accurate view of the population, but hearing from one or two highly vocal people or a couple of highly vocal business owners and coming to the conclusion that everybody wants their children back in school. Well, I don't think that's not the impression I've been getting from people I've spoken to, that it's anything like as unanimous. I mean, people everybody wants their kids back in school. I mean, that was the point I was most critical of, was that, in this release they made, the mayor said, specialists agree that children are better off being educated in school. It's like, no one disputes that for a second. Of course they do better in school. The only question is it safe right now? Is this the best way to control or to look after the interests of the province, to keep numbers down in hospitals, to still avoid death, but above all avoid overloading our systems, which are currently kind of pretty much approaching breaking point again. And it's just like, why are you getting involved in this when you don't need to? I mean, I wonder if it frankly was a response to a request from the provincial government, that the provincial government wanted to do something and they wanted some people to ask the right question. And so they, this kind of thing happens along the back channels. Can you ask for this? And then we'll say yes. Yeah.
Well, that's how this pandemic has been operated to date. Let's face it, Doug Ford hasn't been forward thinking in terms of a vision. He doesn't have the courage to go to the Ontario people at this point and say, listen, folks, we need to change the way that we operate. Here we're going to give money to help small businesses adjust their business model. We'll give, help adjust rent or what, like the real nitty gritty stuff that we might have to say, we're going to have to really adjust the way things operate in this province. Better work, more secure working conditions, more sick pay, that kind of thing, more workers' rights, all that stuff to say this has to change. We're not going back to 2019 anytime soon. We need to have the flexibility and the enforcement to navigate this thing. What happens when a Theta variant or some other variant comes along that may not be as mild as Omicron? It comes around, like, what are we going to sit there to, I guess we got to go back into lockdown because we're flush out of ideas? Like, come on. And that's what I want to see from the municipal level. If these mayors got together and said, this is what we need to see. We need, put a manifesto together of this is what our cities need for COVID. And don't put it just at your powers. Talk about, we need more workers' rights. We need to have better sick pay, sick days off. We need to have rent relief for businesses, or better yet, go talk to landlords about rezoning for whatever. Like there's a lot of stuff that can happen to help alleviate this, and better vaccine enforcement. All this stuff that we don't hear anything from from mayors about this. And I'm quite frankly, I'm sitting here wondering if from this whole pandemic, like what has happened to our leadership in this country?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's like, why are mayors wading into an education question, into a public health question, but secondarily an education question? It's like, talk about municipal stuff. Ontario's big city mayors, if they have clout, could be putting serious pressure on the province to reform the Municipal Act in their favour. To all the things that we talk about week in, week out with the way that planning is done, serious pressure with regard to LPAT or
Ontario Land Tribunal.
That's the one. Yeah, there's so many things that they could be doing that are the banes of their existence week in, week out as mayors, but they do nothing about changing it for reasons that I don't really understand, because they do have serious clout when they want to act together. And I don't think I'm going to get anything out of Doug Ford with regard to LPAT, but if you talk about it enough, you'll make the other parties talk about it,
and maybe you'll make some change happen. But instead it's easier to just write a letter saying, "Get us open," because I think everybody's just fresh out of ideas. I think they are, or they're just the age of the small-minded political leader, the leader who says, "Oh, I'll undersell and overperform," is over. You cannot get by on incrementalism or, hey, I've got a few nice things that I can throw on a brochure. This is a global pandemic. We're at our wits' end. We need big ideas, big, bold ideas. That means you actually have to do work. You actually have to get off your butt and do something about it. And I think that scares a few politicians in power at the moment.
Well, and the saddest thing of all about municipal government across this province is that the best people don't stay in it. Jesse Helmer, we talked to last year, he's not running again. He was vice mayor. There's a guy of huge ability. His annual wage, the salary of councillors in London is something like, I can't remember if it was 12,000 or 20,000. It's a small amount of money for what is undoubtedly a full-time job. He can't stay in that kind of job. So the people who do stay are the last people you want. And because for them, it's the best job they'll ever have. Jesse Helmer can go and do a job anywhere.
The people who stay in a job are the people who can't get a job anywhere else.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
And who would people who never going to get an office as nice as they get as a councillor because they ain't that talented. Good people are the ones who are like, I don't know if I want to stick around this city hall dealing with the toxicity that exists in far too many city halls, if not all of them. Mm-hmm. The difficulty getting anything done in our system, when you don't even control the agenda, despite the fact you're elected. You don't even control the agenda a little bit. And it's like, well, if you are a person of any skill, it's like, well, I'd really like to contribute to my city, but maybe I can do it better outside than inside the city hall building. And I think that's ultimately the biggest tragedy of all, that good people are lost to the system because it ain't that much fun being a good councillor. It can be a lot of fun being a bad one.
All right, well, let's leave it at that for today then. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the 905er. Take care, everyone.
All right.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.